Most people look at a vintage American muscle car and see a beautiful piece of nostalgia. They see chrome, burning rubber, and the golden era of Detroit iron. But if you look closer, if you look at the tax documents, the factory build sheets, and the elite private registries, you realize that classic muscle isn't just a hobby. It's a hyper-stratified financial ladder. Between a $40,000 weekend cruiser and a $50 million piece of global racing royalty lies a brutal filtering system of market economics, corporate contraband, and government intervention. Today, we are climbing that ladder. From the mass-produced illusions meant for the everyday enthusiast to the mythical, hidden prototypes traded exclusively between billionaires, here are the 7 levels of vintage muscle cars and the terrifying price tags required to enter them. Level 1. The Everyman's Illusion. Most people believe that entering the world of vintage muscle cars requires an exclusive invitation, a secret handshake, and a Swiss bank account. It doesn't. At least, not at the ground floor. Level 1 is exemplified by the 1967 Ford Mustang GT. It is the global baseline of the classic car hobby. In 1967 alone, Ford's assembly lines minted nearly 500,000 Mustangs. Because of these staggering production numbers, finding a clean, running, driving V8 Mustang today is simple. You can log on to any online classified site right now and buy an attractive driver-quality car for roughly $45,000. It gives you the exact aesthetic you crave. The long hood, the short deck, the deep V8 rumble, and the inevitable thumbs up from strangers at every red light. But if you peel back the beautiful sheet metal, the reality is sobering. For the vintage car fan who expects a sports car experience, the entry-level muscle car is an exercise in disappointment. Mechanically, a base 1967 Mustang is essentially an agricultural tractor dressed in a tailored suit. It utilizes archaic leaf spring rear suspension technology that Ford borrowed directly from its utility truck line. The steering box has up to 3 inches of dead play in the center, meaning you don't steer the car down the highway so much as you gently guide its drift. Most surprisingly, standard Level 1 cars came equipped with 4-wheel drum brakes. If you attempt 2 consecutive high-speed stops from 60 miles per hour, the brake fluid heats up, the drums expand, and your braking power fades to 0. It is an illusion of performance. It is a mass-produced commodity, masquerading as a high-performance legend. It's an accessible hobby car, but it lacks the one ingredient that defines true investment-grade machinery: scarcity. What happens when production numbers drop from hundreds of thousands to a fraction of a percent? The math changes completely. Level 2. The numbers game. Level 2 introduces us to the 1969 Chevrolet Camaro SS 396. This is the precise tier where the casual enthusiast gets violently filtered out by market economics. We are no longer talking about generic classic cars. We are entering the obsessive, high-stakes domain of factory documentation and casting numbers. On any Saturday night at a local cruise-in, a Level 2 car looks virtually identical to a $20,000 replica built in someone's backyard. The casual observer cannot spot the difference, but to a blue-chip investor, the difference is worth 6 figures. An authentic, investment-grade Level 2 car requires a numbers matching designation. This means the partial vehicle identification number stamped into the cast iron engine block matches the VIN plate on the dashboard perfectly. It means the car survived 50 years without throwing a connecting rod through the oil pan and having the engine replaced with a generic warranty block. Furthermore, it must possess the correct 12-bolt rear differential and the heavy-duty Muncie M 21 4-speed manual transmission. Out of the hundreds of thousands of Camaros built in 1969, only about 10% were equipped with the big block 396 cubic inch V8 from the factory. Because of that paper trail, the price tag for a verified SS 396 doesn't stop at $40,000. It starts at $90,000 and easily clears 6 figures for highly optioned examples. You are no longer paying for the metal, the paint, or the horsepower. you are paying exclusively for scarcity and a verified paper trail. This introduces a terrifying paradox for the owner. The car becomes too valuable to actually use for its intended purpose. If you take a numbers-matching SS396 to a drag strip, dump the clutch at 4,000 RPM, and accidentally detonate that original engine block, 50% of the car's global financial value evaporates before the oil even finishes dripping onto the pavement. It is high-stakes gatekeeping. It transforms a mechanical object into a fragile historic artifact. Yet, it remains a vehicle you can realistically drive to a drive-in theater. Level 3 completely abandons that remaining shred of civility. Level 3, the Street Brute. Level 3 is the 1969 Dodge Charger RT. This is the critical pivot point where American muscle cars stop being heavy sports coupes and transform into actual industrial weapons. The Charger RT, which stood for road and track, did not care about handling, fuel economy, or European design philosophy. It was a 19-foot-long, 4,000-pound block of menacing styling. Underneath its vast hood sat a 440 cubic inch Magnum 5.8 engine, producing a conservative 375 horsepower and a massive 480 foot-pounds of torque. In 1969, you could walk into a Dodge dealership and purchase this asphalt wrinkling machine for roughly $4,000. Today, a pristine, unmolested, factory original RT commands a minimum of $130,000. The reason for this drastic appreciation is a dark piece of automotive history: survival rates. These cars were incredibly cheap to buy new, making them highly accessible to 19-year-old soldiers returning from Vietnam with pockets full of combat pay. They possessed immense low-end torque, but were fitted with skinny, bias-ply polyester tires that offered zero traction. If you mashed the gas pedal, the rear tires simply converted themselves into white smoke, while the heavy front end plowed straight ahead. Consequently, an astonishingly high percentage of these cars were wrapped around telephone poles, slid into ditches, or blown apart on drag strips within their first 24 months of life. A former Chrysler product planner later admitted in a confidential internal memo that selling these ultra-high torque vehicles to the general public without a mandatory performance driving school was, quote, highly profitable madness. Mopar built these cars with unique, quirky engineering that modern collectors obsess over. For instance, the ignition key cylinder is mounted upside down compared to every other American car of the era, and the vehicle features a reverse lockout steering column, meaning you cannot physically remove the ignition key unless you place the massive chrome pistol grip shifter into reverse gear first. The Charger RT was a brutal, glorious manifestation of straight-line dominance, but it was still built on a standard corporate assembly line. What happens when a rogue dealership hijacks the factory ordering system to build a weapon the corporation explicitly banned? Level 4, the corporate contraband. Level 4 brings us to the mythical 1969 Yenko Camaro. To truly understand this vehicle, you have to understand the rigid corporate bureaucracy of mid-century Detroit. In 1969, General Motors corporate leadership issued a strict, unyielding edict to all its divisions. No mid-sized or compact car could be equipped with an engine displacement larger than 400 cubic inches. It was a safety limit, a corporate insurance policy, and a boundary line. But a legendary drag racer and Chevrolet dealership owner named Don Yenko refused to accept the limitation. He discovered a highly secretive loophole hidden deep within the Chevrolet corporate infrastructure. It was called the COPO system, which stood for Central Office Production Order. This backdoor pipeline was originally created for mundane commercial purposes. It allowed municipal governments and corporate entities to place bulk orders for specialized fleet vehicles, such as heavy-duty taxicabs, commercial delivery vans, or dump trucks with upgraded suspension components. Don Yenko realized that the COPO system bypassed the standard assembly line ordering sheets. He placed an order for a fleet of standard Camaros, but instead of checking the boxes for heavy-duty taxi alternators, he used specific fleet codes to order the aluminum head, solid lifter L, 7.2, 427 cubic inch race engine, to be dropped into the engine bays straight from the factory. The result was pure, unadulterated corporate contraband. The Yenko Camaro produced an undocumented, terrifying 500 horsepower. To keep the car under the corporate radar, it left the factory with 0 external high-performance badges, no power steering, no air conditioning, and plain steel wheels. It was a street-legal race car cloaked as a base model. Only 201 were built before GM executives realized what Yenko was doing and shut the loophole down. In 1969, a Yenko Camaro cost $5,000. Today, if you can even find an authentic survivor in a private collection, you will need a minimum of $250,000 liquid just to start the conversation. Sit with that for a moment. A bureaucratic taxicab ordering system was successfully hijacked to create a street-legal dragster that bypassed the safety rules of the world's largest corporation. It is a legendary piece of corporate subversion. Yet, as extreme as the Yenko was, it was still designed to be licensed and driven on public roads. Level 5 was built strictly to dominate professional racing, and it forced the United States federal government to intervene. Level 5, the Homologation Special. Level 5 is the legendary 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda. This is the homologation tier, where the cars are no longer designed around consumer desires, but around the cold, hard rulebooks of professional motorsport. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, racing governing bodies like NASCAR and the SCCA grew tired of manufacturers entering experimental prototype race cars into production classes. They issued a flat ultimatum: if you want to race a specific engine or aerodynamic body style on Sunday, you must manufacture and sell a strict minimum number of those exact identical cars to the general public through your standard dealerships on Monday. Plymouth wanted to use their massive, race-proven 426 cubic inch Hemi Phoebe 8 with its massive hemispherical combustion chambers in production drag racing classes. To satisfy the rulebook, they created the Hemi Cuda. To physically fit this absolute mountain of an iron engine into the compact E-body chassis, Plymouth engineers had to completely redesign the front of the car. They widened the entire body of the Barracuda by more than 5 inches compared to the previous model year, and pushed the front track width out by 3 inches, just to make room for the massive engine and the specialized, heavy-duty 60 series tires required to handle the power. The Hemi engine option alone was in financial absurdity. It added nearly $900 to the car's base price of $3,100. It was a nearly 1/3 premium just for the power plant. Plymouth only managed to sell 652 of these hardtops because they were an absolute nightmare to live with. The race-bred engine utilized dual Carter 4-barrel carburetors that required constant, highly technical tuning. If you drove the car in normal, stop-and-go city traffic, the spark plugs would foul out within 30 minutes, causing the engine to sputter and die. Worse still, corporate insurance companies quickly calculated the power-to-weight ratio and began charging annual insurance premiums that totaled up to 20% of the car's entire purchase price. The market for them collapsed almost overnight. But 50 years later, that commercial disaster is a financial masterpiece. A standard documented 1970 Hemi Cuda routinely trades between $350,000 and $500,000. But there is a sub-tier to level 5 that enters the stratosphere of wealth. Plymouth built just 14 convertible versions of the Hemi Cuda in 1970. Because of that extreme rarity, they have become the absolute apex of Mopar collecting. A few years ago, an original, numbers-matching 1970 Hemi Cuda convertible crossed the auction block and traded hands for a staggering $3.5 million. It is an economic anomaly. A car built with the loose panel gaps and cheap interior plastics of a mass-produced 1970s Plymouth, now commanding a higher valuation than a modern carbon fiber Ferrari hypercar. It is no longer a vehicle. It is a blue-chip financial asset traded via wire transfers between billionaires who will never dare to turn the key. Level 6, the Racing Royalty. Level 6 is the 1965 Shelby Mustang GT350R. With this vehicle, we completely exit the world of commercial dealership networks, consumer options, and street legality. This is pure, unadulterated competition pedigree. In late 1964, Ford Motor Company faced a significant marketing crisis. Their brand new Mustang was selling in massive numbers to the public, but the automotive press was dismissive, labeling it a secretary's car because it lacked any real sports car performance or racing credibility. Ford desperately needed to inject racing DNA into the chassis, so they turned to the one man who knew how to win, Carroll Shelby. Shelby took standard K-code fastback Mustangs shipped directly from San Jose and completely tore them apart at his specialized facility near the Los Angeles airport. He pulled out the entire interior, threw away the sound insulation, removed the rear seats completely, and replaced the heavy factory glass windows with ultra-lightweight fixed plexiglass. He re-engineered the front suspension geometry, added a massive override traction bar system to the rear axle, and bolted in a highly modified solid lifter 28.9 cubic inch V8 engine, producing a screaming 350 horsepower in a chassis that weighed just 2,400 pounds. Only 34 of these authentic R specification competition models were ever built. They were not intended for the street. They were purpose-built track weapons designed to do one thing: crush Chevrolet's Corvette in SCCA B production racing. The GT350R did exactly that, capturing the national championship 3 consecutive years in a row and permanently cementing the Mustang nameplate into the annals of global motorsport history. To own a genuine, documented GT350R today requires more than just money. It requires access to elite, invitation-only collector networks. These cars rarely, if ever, appear at public auction. They are traded privately between high net worth individuals for sums comfortably exceeding $1 million. A Level 6 car lives its life inside a climate-controlled, museum-grade vault, resting on specialized tires, its fluid levels monitored by dedicated mechanics. It represents the absolute peak of what an American muscle platform could achieve within the confines of domestic track racing rules. Level 7, the Anomaly. But then there is Level 7, the absolute ceiling of American automotive valuation and historical significance, the 1965 Shelby Daytona Coupe. To understand Level 7, you must understand that in the mid-1960s, European sports car racing was dominated by one man, Enzo Ferrari. His front-engine V12 masterpieces, the Ferrari 250 GTOs, were completely unbeatable on the long, high-speed straights of European circuits like Le Mans and Monza. Carroll Shelby's open-top Cobra Roadsters were incredibly fast on tight American short tracks. But when they arrived in Europe, their blunt, unaerodynamic front profiles acted like giant brick walls in the wind. The Cobras would hit an aerodynamic wall at 150 miles per hour, while the sleek Ferraris would stream past them at 180. Carroll Shelby knew he needed a radical solution. He tasked a brilliant, self-taught 26-year-old designer named Pete Brock with completely redesigning the Cobra's body from scratch. Working in a small corner of the shop without computers, wind tunnels, or advanced mathematical modeling, Brock sketched out a radical, low-slung, fastback aluminum body featuring an unconventional chopped rear end, known as a camtail. When the veteran hot rod fabricators in Shelby's shop looked at the drawings, they openly mocked Brock. They claimed the car looked like an ugly, deformed truck and predicted it would be a dangerous, unstable disaster on the track. Even Enzo Ferrari's engineers laughed when the car first arrived at the test tracks. Then, the green flag dropped. On the Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans, Pete Brock's amateur aerodynamics worked flawlessly. The Daytona Coupe didn't just match Ferrari, it completely humiliated them. The car achieved a top speed of over 190 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour faster than the open-top Roadster using the exact same engine. The Daytona Coupe stormed through the 1965 season, capturing the FIA World Manufacturers Championship and marking the first and only time an American manufacturer has ever won that prestigious global title. Only 6 original Shelby Daytona Coupes were ever manufactured. Today, they are considered completely, utterly priceless. They are the holy grail of American industrial history. If one of the 6 were ever to be offered at public auction today, automotive economists estimate the starting bid would easily clear $30 million, quickly climbing toward 40 or 50 million. It is an asset class that transcends the automotive hobby completely. It is treated with the same cultural and financial reverence as a canvas painted by Monet or Picasso. But what if I told you that one of those 6 original world champion Daytona Coupes didn't end up safely secured in a famous museum or a billionaire's collection? What if I told you that the very first prototype, the historic chassis, number CSX2287, the single most valuable car of the entire production run, vanished off the face of the earth for nearly 3 decades? What if I told you it spent 25 years gathering dust inside a dimly lit commercial rental storage locker in Anaheim, California, hidden beneath a mountain of old cardboard boxes and junk, fiercely guarded by a reclusive, troubled woman who flatly refused to admit to the world that she owned it, until the tragic day she walked into an open park with her 2 pet rabbits and took her own life in a horrific act of self-immolation? The story of chassis CSX2287 isn't just about a car. It is a decades-long psychological thriller involving rock and roll icons, eccentric billionaires, secret handshakes, and a legal war that tore families apart, all centered around a machine that lay rotting in the California dirt while the rest of the world thought it was gone forever. Because when an object becomes that rare, it ceases to be a machine. It becomes a curse to those who own it, and an obsession to those who hunt it. The 7 levels of muscle cars show us the power of scarcity. We start by buying a dream we can drive on the weekend, and we end in a world where cars are treated like priceless fine art, locked away in climate-controlled vaults, never to be driven again. But as for the final darkest level, the secret history of the lost Daytona Coupe, the billionaire bounty hunts, and the tragic fate of the woman who held the keys to the Holy Grail, well, that is a story for next time.